"It's your fault you got pregnant," he said, and 2 years later, the Millionaire CEO froze when he saw her pushing a stroller with twins. "Hi, my beautiful and loyal family. Welcome back to your safe and loving home, Mr. Peter's family. May the Almighty hold every woman in a shelter of strength, lifting her above every insult, every wound, every moment she was made to feel unworthy. May your broken places turn into bridges of healing, and may every tear you cried become a seed of miracles waiting to bloom. You are the quiet fighter, the gentle nurturer, the heart that never stops giving even when the world tries to break you. May peace greet you in the morning, grace carry you through the day, and love follow you through every dark corner until you shine again. My precious family, your presence here is not small. Your support keeps this home alive. A like is a whisper of strength. A comment is a chain of unity. If your heart knows love, like this video. If your spirit stands with truth, comment, "I'm with Mr. Peter." Some mistakes taste like champagne and feel like forever, until morning comes. The crystal chandeliers of the Metropolitan Grand Hotel cast fractured rainbows across the ballroom floor, where Seattle's elite mingled in designer gowns and tailored suits. Avery Morgan stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, champagne flute in hand, only half listening to a petroleum executive drone about offshore drilling permits. Her mind was calculating the proposal she'd submit tomorrow for the waterfront revitalization project. She'd built her reputation as one of the most innovative urban development consultants on the West Coast through relentless work, not charity galas. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else." The voice came from behind her, smooth and confident. Avery turned to find a man whose presence seemed to shift the energy in the room. Tall, with dark hair touched with silver at the temples, he had sharp features that suggested both intelligence and danger. His eyes were an unusual shade of grey-blue, like storm clouds over the ocean. "That obvious," Avery replied, allowing herself a genuine smile, only to someone who feels the same way. He extended his hand. Mike Driggers. Avery recognized the name immediately. Driggers' construction empire had transformed skylines across the country. The company was worth billions, and the man before her had built it into an industry giant. "Avery Morgan, and yes, I know who you are." "Should I be flattered or concerned?" His smile was disarming. "Depends on whether you're here for the charity or the networking." "Honestly, neither. My PR team insists I make appearances." He gestured toward the exit. "I was planning an escape. The question is whether I'm brave enough to execute it." Thunder rumbled outside. Rain had begun to fall, quickly turning into sheets of water cascading down the glass. The storm had arrived earlier than forecasted. "Looks like fate's making the decision for you," Avery observed. They talked for hours, migrating from the ballroom to a quieter lounge as the gala wound down. Mike spoke passionately about sustainable construction, about buildings that gave back to communities. He asked about her work with genuine interest, listening as she described her approach to urban development. "You actually care," Avery said, surprised. "Most developers just want to maximize profit margins." "My father taught me that buildings outlive us. They're either monuments to our greed or our hope. I prefer hope." The power flickered once, twice, then died completely. Emergency lights cast everything in eerie glow. A hotel manager appeared, apologetic, explaining that the storm had knocked out power across several blocks. With flooding on the main roads, travel wasn't advised. "I have a suite upstairs," Mike said quietly. "There's a couch. You're welcome to wait out the storm there rather than in the lobby chaos." Avery knew she should decline. Every professional instinct screamed caution, but something in his eyes, vulnerability beneath the confidence, made her nod. The suite revealed the storm in all its fury, lightning illuminating the city in brilliant flashes. Mike poured whiskey from the minibar, and they stood at the window, watching nature's violence. "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone?" Mike's voice was soft. "We're strangers. Sometimes that's when the truth comes easiest." I'm terrified I'm becoming my father. Not the good parts, the bitter parts. He died last year, and all I could think at the funeral was how much anger he carried. His divorce poisoned everything. He spent his last decade convinced every woman was after his money. Is that what you believe? I don't want to, but I see his suspicion in my own thoughts sometimes. Avery turned to face him fully. You're not your father. The fact that you're afraid of becoming him means you won't. The kiss happened like lightning, sudden, inevitable, electric. One moment they were talking, the next, his hands were in her hair, and hers were pulling him closer. The storm raged outside as they stumbled toward the bedroom, shedding clothes and inhibitions. They made love with desperate intensity, as if they could outrun their demons through touch and heat and breathless need. Rain drummed against windows, thunder shook walls, and for those hours, nothing existed beyond their sanctuary. Afterward, tangled in sheets, Mike traced patterns on her shoulder. Stay, he whispered, not just tonight. Avery wanted to, but she'd built her career on smart decisions. Let's see what tomorrow brings. She fell asleep in his arms, feeling safer than she had in years. When she woke, weak dawn light filtered through windows. The storm had passed. Mike stood dressed in a suit, phone pressed to his ear, his voice cold and corporate. The warmth from the night before had vanished completely. He ended the call and turned. His eyes were now flat and distant. Last night was a mistake, he said businesslike. I apologize if I gave you the wrong impression. I have a car waiting downstairs for you. Avery sat up, confusion and hurt warring in her chest. What happened? Nothing changed. I remembered who I am and what I can't afford. Complications. He picked up her dress from the floor, held it out without meeting her eyes. You should go. Pride made Avery dress quickly, refusing to let him see how much his words cut. She walked to the door with her head high, then turned back. You're right about one thing. You are becoming your father. Not because of what he taught you, but because you're too much of a coward to fight it. She left him standing there and didn't look back. The elevator doors closed, and Avery finally let herself feel the weight of what had just happened. She'd given herself to a stranger and gotten exactly what she deserved, a reminder that fairy tales don't exist. She had no idea that in a few weeks everything would change again, and the man who'd just dismissed her would become impossible to forget. The city looked different in daylight, washed clean by the storm, but somehow colder. Avery walked to her car, her heels clicking against wet pavement. She drove home to her Capitol Hill apartment, showered away the scent of him, and tried to scrub away the memory of his hands, his mouth, his whispered promises. But some stains go deeper than skin, and Mike Driggers had just become the biggest mistake of her life. Though she didn't yet know how big, didn't yet know that the consequence of one rainy night would change everything she thought she knew about strength and survival. She just knew that she hurt, and that hurt would have to become fuel because Avery Morgan didn't have the luxury of staying broken. The storm had passed, the fairy tale had ended, real life was waiting, and Avery Morgan was ready to face it alone. Chapter 2. Shattered Illusions. The cruelest words aren't screamed. They're delivered in a calm, executive tone. Avery's apartment felt too quiet in the weeks following that morning. She'd thrown herself into work, taking on extra projects, staying late at the office, anything to keep her mind from drifting back to rain-streaked windows and hands that had held her like she mattered. Professional pride demanded she forget Mike Driggers entirely. Then came the nausea that wouldn't stop, exhaustion that sleep couldn't cure, strange tenderness that made wearing her usual fitted blazers uncomfortable. At first, she blamed stress. The waterfront project had grown complicated. But when her period didn't come, when a full week passed and then another, cold dread settled in her stomach. She bought a pregnancy test from a pharmacy 3 neighborhoods away, as if distance could insulate her from reality. The 2 pink lines appeared before she'd finished counting seconds. Stark, undeniable, impossible. Avery stared at that little stick until her vision blurred, her mind refusing to process what her body already knew. This couldn't be happening. She was careful, always careful, except for one storm-soaked night when caution had drowned in champagne and chemistry. She took 3 more tests, all positive. For days, Avery wrestled with the decision alone. She had options. She believed in choice, had always supported women controlling their own bodies. But as she sat with that knowledge, something unexpected happened. The panic transformed into fierce protective instinct she hadn't known she possessed. She'd always wanted children someday, just not like this, not alone, not with a father who'd rejected her before he'd even known she existed. But when had Avery Morgan ever done things the easy way? The decision crystallized slowly but completely. She would keep this baby. She would raise it alone if necessary. She would build a life that didn't need Mike Driggers's money or his name or his grudging acknowledgement. But he deserved to know. Whatever he'd become that morning, he had a right to this information. What he did with it was his choice. Getting to him proved harder than expected. His assistant screened calls ruthlessly. Finally, desperate, she used a professional contact to request a meeting about a development consultation. The assistant scheduled her immediately. Drigger's construction occupied the top 5 floors of a gleaming tower. The executive suite was all glass and steel and breathtaking views designed to intimidate. Mike sat behind a massive desk, reviewing documents, and didn't look up immediately when she entered. When he finally did, shock flickered across his features before smoothing into professional neutrality. "Ms. Morgan, this is unexpected. We don't have business to discuss," Avery said once the door closed. "But we have something more important." Mike stood slowly. "If you're here about that night, I thought I made my position clear. I'm pregnant." The words dropped between them like stones into still water. Mike's carefully controlled expression cracked slightly before he caught himself. "I see," he said slowly, "and you're certain it's mine?" The question stung. "Yes." "Have you confirmed this medically?" 3 home tests and a doctor's appointment. I'm about 6 weeks along." Mike walked to his windows, hands clasped behind his back. The silence stretched before he spoke. "What do you want?" "I'm telling you because you have a right to know. I've decided to keep the baby. I'm not asking you for anything." He turned, eyes cold. "Aren't you? Come now, Ms. Morgan. You attended that gala knowing I'd be there. You engineered our meeting, our night together. This was always the end game." Avery felt slapped. "You think I planned this? I think you saw an opportunity and took it. You're not the first woman to try this. My father dealt with 3 paternity claims, all schemes, all wanted money." "I don't want your money." "Then what? Marriage? The fairy tale?" Mike opened a drawer, pulled out a checkbook. "Let's skip the performance. How much to make this go away?" He wrote a figure, 6 digits, and held it out. Avery stared at the check, at the man offering it. Something inside her crystallized into diamond-hard resolve. She took the check, and for a moment Mike looked satisfied. Then she tore it methodically into small pieces and let them flutter onto his desk like snow. "It's your fault you got pregnant," Mike said, his voice sharp. "You knew the risks. If you chose to let this happen, that's on you. I'm offering you a generous settlement to handle the situation privately and disappear. This is the only offer you'll receive." Avery's hands shook with rage, but her voice was steady. "I came here because I thought you deserved to know. I thought despite everything there might be a decent person inside you. I was wrong. Ms. Morgan, I will raise this child without you, without your money, without your name, without anything from you. And years from now, when you're alone in your tower, remember that you had a chance to be part of something real, and you threw it away because you were too damaged and too afraid." She walked to the door, then paused. "You're not becoming your father. You already are him. The only difference is he had the excuse of real betrayal. You're just a coward hiding behind his ghost." Avery walked through the executive suite with her head high, rode the elevator down, made it to her car before the tears came. She sat in the parking garage and sobbed, mourning not just the loss of support, but the loss of the man she'd thought she'd glimpsed that night. When the tears stopped, Avery looked at herself in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were red, her face blotchy. But beneath the devastation, she saw determination. "Okay, baby," she whispered, touching her stomach. "It's just you and me, and I promise you, that's going to be enough." She started her car and drove away from Driggers Tower, away from Mike Driggers, away from the foolish fantasy that had briefly made her believe in fairy tales. She didn't look back. The road ahead would be harder than any she'd traveled. But Avery Morgan had never chosen the easy path. And raising this child alone, proving she could build a life without the man who'd rejected them both, felt like the rightest choice she'd ever made. Even if it hurt, even if she was terrified, even if some small part of her still wished things could be different, they couldn't be. And she would learn to be okay with that. She would learn to thrive, because that's what survivors do. They take pain and transform it into power. And Avery Morgan was about to become the most powerful version of herself she'd ever been. Chapter 3. Building from Ashes. Desperation doesn't break strong women. It forges them into something unbreakable. The move to Portland happened within a month. Avery couldn't build a new life in Seattle, where Mike Driggers' towers loomed over the skyline like accusations. Portland was close enough to maintain West Coast clients, but far enough to breathe. She found a small apartment in the Alphabet District, the kind of neighborhood where mothers pushed strollers and no one cared about corporate empires. The first trimester was brutal. Morning sickness struck at all hours, leaving Avery hunched over toilets between conference calls. She worked remotely when possible, traveling to client sites when absolutely necessary, hiding her expanding waistline under flowing blazers. She told no one about the pregnancy, paranoid that word would reach Mike. Then came the ultrasound at 10 weeks that changed everything. "Well," the technician said, moving the wand across Avery's gel-covered belly, "I hope you're ready for an adventure." Avery's heart dropped. "Is something wrong?" "Quite the opposite. See here and here?" The technician pointed at the screen. "Congratulations, you're having twins." Twins, 2 babies, 2 lives depending entirely on her. Avery stared at the grainy image, at 2 tiny forms, and felt terror and joy collide in her chest. That night, alone in her apartment with ultrasound photos scattered across her coffee table, Avery made lists. Every scenario ended in red ink and overwhelm. Her savings would barely last through maternity leave. She'd need help, and she had no family to call on. For the first time since leaving Mike's office, Avery let herself cry from fear. But eventually, the tears stopped, because tears solved nothing. She looked at those ultrasound images again and made herself a promise. "I will give you everything you need," she whispered, "whatever it takes." She started building that promise immediately. A former colleague referred her to a non-profit developing affordable housing. The pay was modest, but they offered flexible hours. She wrote articles for urban planning journals late at night, building her reputation. Each article brought consulting opportunities, small at first, but growing. The pregnancy grew complicated. Gestational diabetes appeared. Her blood pressure spiked, forcing bed rest. She worked from bed, laptop balanced on her massive belly, refusing to let circumstances become excuses. "You're going to work yourself into early labor," her doctor warned. "Then I'll work from the hospital," Avery replied, only half joking. Labor started on a rainy evening in March. Fitting and cruel. Avery drove herself to the hospital, gripping the steering wheel through contractions. The labor was long and difficult, 18 hours of relentless pain. She labored alone except for rotating nurses. At 36 weeks, the twins finally arrived. The nurses placed 2 tiny, perfect girls on her chest, and Avery understood what people meant by love at first sight. "Names?" a nurse asked gently. "Luna," Avery said, touching the first baby's head. "And Ava." The next months dissolved into sleepless nights and constant feeding. Avery hired a part-time nanny named Rosa, a grandmother who treated Luna and Ava like her own grandbabies. Rosa became family, arriving each morning with homemade food and endless patience. "You're doing beautifully, Mija," Rosa would say when Avery broke down crying from exhaustion. With Rosa's help, Avery slowly rebuilt her professional life. She accepted consulting jobs she could do remotely. Her ideas about mixed-use developments caught attention. A profile in Portland Monthly called her the conscience of urban development. She launched Morgan Urban Solutions on the twins' first birthday, working from her apartment. Her first major client wanted to revitalize a neighborhood without displacing residents. Avery designed a plan incorporating affordable housing and community spaces. The project won awards and attracted more clients. By the time Luna and Ava were walking, Morgan Urban Solutions had real office space and 3 employees. By the time they could talk, Avery had opened a second office. She built an empire in stolen hours between bedtimes and breakfast. "Mama busy," Ava would tell people solemnly. "Mama building," Luna would add. The girls grew into bright, curious children. Luna was cautious and thoughtful. Ava was bold and adventurous. They were opposite but inseparable, finishing each other's sentences. They looked like Avery, same warm brown skin, same dark eyes. But sometimes Avery caught glimpses of Mike. Luna had his thoughtful expression. Ava had his devastating smile. She never spoke about their father. When they asked why they had no daddy, Avery said simply, "Some families have 2 parents, some have 1. We have each other, and that's enough." And it was enough. Avery took the girls to parks and museums, read them stories every night, celebrated every milestone. She built a chosen family of friends and Rosa. She created a world where Luna and Ava felt secure and loved. Morgan Urban Solutions continued growing. Avery was invited to speak at conferences, to consult on projects in other cities. Magazine profiles called her a visionary, a force transforming cities. What they didn't see were the nights Avery lay awake worrying, the moments when exhaustion overwhelmed her. They didn't see her crying when loneliness felt crushing, or looking at her daughters and feeling grief for the man who'd rejected them, but those moments passed. Avery learned to be both mother and mogul, soft at home and steel in boardrooms. She learned that she didn't need a partner to complete her story. Mike Driggers became a ghost in her past, a cautionary tale about trusting the wrong person. She never tried to contact him again, never asked for support. Her daughters were hers alone. She had no idea that fate was about to bring him crashing back, or that the price of pride would come due for both of them, but that reckoning was still years away. For now, Avery had everything she needed: 2 beautiful daughters, a thriving company, knowledge that she'd survived the worst and emerged stronger. That would have to be enough, because it was all she had, and somehow, miraculously, it was everything. Chapter 4. The Empire She Built. Success tastes sweetest when you've earned every bitter ingredient. The morning started like any other in the carefully orchestrated chaos that defined Avery Morgan's life. Luna insisted on wearing her purple dinosaur shirt, despite it being dirty, and Ava dumped cereal trying to feed herself. Avery negotiated, cleaned, and got both girls dressed while answering emails on her phone. This was her superpower, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Auntie Rosa's picking you up from preschool today," Avery told them as she buckled car seats. "I have a big meeting." "Bigger than us?" Luna asked, concerned. Avery's heart squeezed. "Nothing is bigger than you 2. But this meeting helps Mama build things, and building things means we can have adventures together." "The zoo?" Ava bounced enthusiastically. "We can see all the animals," Avery promised, "but only if you're good listeners today. Deal?" "Deal!" they chorused. She dropped them at Little Explorers Preschool, watching them run inside hand in hand. These separations never got easier. Part of Avery always wanted to keep them close, where nothing could hurt them, but that wasn't preparing them for the world. Morgan Urban Solutions occupied the 10th floor of a renovated historic building, all exposed brick and modern glass. Honor the past while building the future. Her team had grown to 15 employees, each chosen for commitment to ethical development work. Morning, boss. Jasmine fell into step beside her. The Portland Commons project got final approval. Council voted unanimously. Which proposal? Avery shrugged off her coat, mentally pulling up project files. The one with vertical gardens and affordable units integrated throughout instead of segregated. Your presentation about dignity in housing made 2 council members cry. Avery smiled. That project had been her passion, fighting developers who wanted one poor people tower in back. She'd convinced them true mixed-income communities created value for everyone. Set up a celebration lunch for the team. They earned it. Her office overlooked the city but was decorated with what mattered. Photos of Luna and Ava covering one wall, their artwork on another, their favorite books on a shelf. The day filled with meetings that would have overwhelmed her former self. But motherhood had taught efficiency, how to make decisions quickly, cut through nonsense, manage multiple crises without losing focus. A developer wanted her input on a Vancouver waterfront project. A city council member sought zoning reform advice. A national magazine requested an interview about women transforming American cities. Avery fielded them all with practiced ease, negotiating from positions of strength. She'd learned to turn down projects that didn't align with her values. Companies competed for her attention now for the Morgan seal of approval. "You have a call from Seattle," her assistant mentioned. "Someone from the mayor's office about a major project, the waterfront redevelopment. They want to discuss bringing you on as lead consultant." Seattle. The name hit Avery physically, tightening something in her chest. She'd carefully avoided Seattle projects despite numerous offers, had built a career around never returning to the city where her life had imploded. "Tell them I'm not taking Seattle projects," Avery said automatically. "They specifically requested you. This would be the biggest thing we've ever been involved with. Career-defining." Avery closed her eyes, processing. The Seattle waterfront project. She remembered it from years ago, had been working on preliminaries before her life exploded. It had been her dream job once, the kind of project that defined entire careers. "Schedule a preliminary call," Avery heard herself say, "but no commitments." That evening, she picked up the girls from Rosa's house. They crashed into her legs, talking over each other about their day. At home, Avery made simple pasta because exhaustion was real and good enough was actually perfect. This was her favorite transition, shedding professional armor for something softer. After dinner, bath time, story time, the carefully structured routine that made their world safe. Avery read their current favorite about a brave mouse, using different voices until both girls giggled. "Mama?" Luna asked as Avery tucked them in. "When I grow up, can I build things like you?" "You can build anything you want, baby." "I want to build a castle for dragons," Ava announced, "with big doors." "Then you'll need to make the doors extra big," Avery said, kissing each forehead. "And fireproof." She stood in their doorway after they'd fallen asleep, watching their small forms, their breathing synchronized even in sleep. Everything she'd built existed to give them security and possibilities. Later, alone in bed, Avery pulled up information about Seattle's waterfront project. It had evolved significantly, grown more ambitious. The city wanted something revolutionary, setting new national standards. It was exactly the kind of challenge that made her pulse race. But taking it meant returning to Seattle regularly, working in a city where Mike Driggers had major influence. The odds of their paths crossing were virtually guaranteed. Could she handle that? Did she want to? Avery thought about the woman she'd been that morning in Mike's office, pregnant and desperate and heartbroken. Then she thought about who she'd become, CEO, mother to incredible children, recognized expert. She'd transformed pain into power. Maybe it was time to stop running from ghosts. Maybe it was time to walk back into that city and show everyone, including Mike Driggers, exactly what she'd built from his cruelty. Her phone buzzed. "Jasmine, FYI, just got word that Driggers Construction is one of the lead bidders on Seattle waterfront. Thought you should know." Avery stared at the message, heart hammering. Of course Mike would be involved. If she took this job, she'd be evaluating his proposal, potentially working alongside him. The old Avery would have declined immediately. But this Avery had learned that avoiding challenges meant limiting possibilities. The best revenge wasn't anger, it was undeniable success. She typed back, "Noted, schedule the Seattle call for tomorrow afternoon." Then she lay back, wondering what kind of man Mike had become, wondering if he'd ever thought about that night, about the woman he'd dismissed, about the child he'd rejected. Most importantly, wondering if she was strong enough to face him again and remain unshaken. Only one way to find out. Avery turned off her light, knowing sleep would be elusive. Tomorrow, she'd hear the proposal. She'd evaluate whether this opportunity was worth reopening old wounds, and if she decided to take it, she'd walk into Seattle like the conqueror she'd become. Mike Driggers would see exactly what he'd thrown away, and she'd make damn sure it hurt him to look. That felt like justice. That felt like the ending her story deserved, not a fairy tale, but triumph earned through years of hard work. She was ready. The question was whether he was. Chapter 5. The Collision Course. Fate doesn't knock, it crashes through the door at the worst possible moment. The Seattle mayor's office officially extended the invitation 3 days later. They wanted Morgan Urban Solutions as lead consultant for the waterfront redevelopment, evaluating all proposals and ensuring the project served the community. It was the kind of role that could define an entire career. "The compensation is extraordinary," Jasmine noted during their strategy meeting, "and the publicity alone would be worth it. Every major publication will cover this." "What about timeline?" Avery asked, though she'd memorized every detail. "They want someone on site at least 3 days weekly for the first phase. That's roughly 6 months of intensive work, plus ongoing consultation. We're talking multiple years total. 6 months of regular Seattle trips, of navigating a city filled with memories, of possibly running into Mike." Avery weighed professional opportunity against personal risk. "I'll need to bring the girls," she said finally. "I'm not leaving them in Portland for days at a time. That's non-negotiable." "Absolutely. We can set up corporate housing, something family-friendly. Rosa's already said she'd make the trips." I checked. Avery felt grateful for her chosen family. "Accept the offer. Tell them I start in 3 weeks." Telling Luna and Ava proved harder. At almost 5, they'd developed strong preferences and routines. "We're going on an adventure," Avery explained during dinner, keeping her voice bright. "We're going to live in Seattle for a little while." "But I like home," Luna said, lower lip trembling. "We'll still have this home. Seattle is just temporary. We'll come back to Portland all the time." "Will Auntie Rosa come?" Ava asked, practical as always. "Yes, and we'll find new parks and maybe see the ocean." "Will we make new friends?" Luna asked quietly, fear beneath the question. "You might, but you'll always have each other, and me and Auntie Rosa. We're a team. We stick together no matter where we are." The weeks before the move passed in a blur. Avery arranged corporate housing in Queen Anne, far enough from downtown to feel separate. She coordinated with her Portland team, researched Seattle preschools, found one emphasizing kindness over academic pressure. And she tried desperately not to think about Mike Driggers, about what he looked like now, whether he'd changed, how he'd react to seeing her in power over his project. Those thoughts led nowhere productive. The preliminary meeting was scheduled for Wednesday morning at City Hall. Avery arrived deliberately early, wanting to control the space. She wore what she thought of as armor, tailored navy suit conveying authority, pearl earrings Luna and Ava had helped choose that morning. The conference room was filling when she entered. City officials, urban planners, a Seattle Times reporter, and representatives from 5 development companies. Avery scanned the room, noting faces, reading body language, assessing alliances. Then the door opened, and Mike Driggers walked in. Avery's heart kicked against her ribs, but her face remained perfectly composed. She'd prepared for this moment, rehearsed reactions, built walls that couldn't be breached. He looked the same, yet different. Maybe more silver in his hair, faint lines around his eyes. Still handsome in that sharp, dangerous way, still commanding attention the moment he entered. Their eyes met across the room. Avery watched shock flicker across his features. He clearly hadn't known she'd be here. Good. Let him be off balance. She turned away deliberately, focusing on the city planning director approaching to greet her. "Ms. Morgan, we're absolutely thrilled to have you. Your Portland work has been extraordinary." "Thank you. I'm excited about the possibilities here." The meeting began. Each development company presented their vision. Avery listened intently, taking notes, asking pointed questions revealing whether presenters had researched community needs or just designed ego monuments. When Mike's turn came, Avery forced herself to focus purely on the proposal. Drigger's Construction proposed mixed-use development with significant green space, affordable housing integrated throughout, and local hiring commitments. It was good, frustratingly good, exactly the kind of thoughtful approach Avery advocated for. "Questions for Mr. Driggers?" the mayor asked. Avery raised her hand. "The affordable housing component. Your proposal mentions integration, but I don't see specific income thresholds or long-term affordability guarantees. How do you prevent market rate conversion?" Mike's eyes locked on hers. "We're proposing 50-year deed restrictions with income qualifications tied to area median income. Units managed through a community land trust for permanent affordability." "And the local hiring commitment? What percentage, and how do you verify compliance?" 30% of construction jobs reserved for residents within 5 miles, with quarterly reporting and financial penalties for non-compliance. Avery made notes, expression neutral. He'd done his homework. The proposal was excellent, addressing every concern she'd have raised. The meeting continued another hour. When it finally concluded, people clustered in groups, networking and politicking. Avery gathered her materials, intending to leave quickly. "Ms. Morgan," she'd known he'd approach. Avery turned slowly, meeting his gaze with cool professionalism. "Mr. Driggers." "I wasn't aware you'd be consulting on this project," Mike said carefully. "I wasn't aware you needed to be informed of my professional engagements." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "Could we speak privately?" "We have nothing private to discuss. If you have questions about the evaluation process, submit them in writing to the mayor's office." Avery. "It's Ms. Morgan in professional settings, Mr. Driggers. I'd appreciate if you'd remember that." She walked away before he could respond, heels clicking sharply against marble. She made it to the elevator, to the parking garage, to her car, before her hands started shaking. Seeing him had been harder than anticipated, not because she still felt anything romantic. That part had calcified into scar tissue. But because looking at his face meant seeing echoes of her daughters, meant remembering the night that changed everything, meant confronting reality that this man had rejected Luna and Ava before they'd existed. Avery sat in her car and practiced breathing techniques from therapy. Center yourself. Focus on what you can control. You are not that broken woman anymore. When her heart rate slowed, she drove to the corporate apartment where Rosa had the girls. They were building with blocks when she entered, their faces lighting up at seeing her. "Mama, come see!" Ava grabbed her hand, pulling her toward their creation. "It's taller than me!" Avery knelt beside them, pulling both girls into her arms, breathing in their powder-fresh scent. This was real. This was what mattered. "It's beautiful," she told them, examining their lopsided creation. "Tell me about it." "It's a castle for us," Luna explained seriously, "with a tower for reading and a tower for adventures. So you can each do what you love," Avery said, understanding immediately. "That's perfect design." That evening, after the girls were asleep, Avery stood at the apartment window looking out at Seattle's lights. The city spread before her like a battlefield. Somewhere out there, Mike was probably in his tower, maybe thinking about their encounter. She wondered what he'd thought seeing her. Had he recognized the confidence built from his cruelty? Had he felt even a flicker of regret? It didn't matter. Avery wasn't here for his approval or regret. She was here to do a job that would cement her reputation. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number, subject line. We need to talk. Avery knew who it was. Mike had tracked down her personal email. The message was brief. Avery, I understand you prefer to keep things professional, but there are matters we need to discuss outside this project. Please meet me for coffee. I promise to respect your time and boundaries. Mike. She stared at the message for a long time. The smart move was to delete it, maintain boundaries. But curiosity gnawed at her. What could he possibly want to discuss? Avery typed a response. I have exactly 15 minutes available tomorrow at 7 a.m., the coffee shop on 5th and Pine. If you're even 1 minute late, I'm leaving immediately. She hit send before reconsidering. Tomorrow, she'd hear whatever he thought was so important. Then she'd get back to work, back to her daughters, back to the life she'd built without him. She just hoped her armor would hold against whatever weapons he might deploy. Chapter 6. The truth surfaces. Some secrets hide in plain sight, waiting in double strollers at farmers' markets. Mike Driggers hadn't slept. He'd spent the entire night in his penthouse, pacing between rooms, staring at city lights that offered no answers, replaying the conference room encounter on an endless loop. Avery Morgan. After all this time, there she was, transformed, powerful, looking at him like he was just another developer with a proposal to evaluate. He'd thought about her more than he wanted to admit over the years. Guilt lingered, showing up at 3 a.m. when defenses were down. He'd convinced himself she'd moved on, married someone better, lived a happy life that didn't include the damage he'd inflicted. Seeing her yesterday shattered that comfortable delusion completely. She'd moved on, yes, but not in any way he'd imagined. She'd taken whatever pain he'd caused and alchemized it into pure power, had become someone who commanded rooms and made experienced developers sweat under her questioning. It made what he'd done somehow worse. The coffee shop was nearly empty when Mike arrived at 6:45. He ordered 2 coffees, black for himself, a latte for her, remembering she'd liked those, then realized she might not drink the same thing anymore. Avery arrived at exactly 7 o'clock, not a minute early or late. She wore jeans and a blazer, casual but somehow more intimidating. Her hair was pulled back simply, minimal makeup, nothing to hide behind. You're punctual, she said flatly. You said you'd leave if I was late. Mike pushed the latte toward her. I didn't know if you still drink these. I don't. She left the cup sitting untouched between them. You have 15 minutes. Use them wisely. Mike had rehearsed this conversation 100 times. Now, facing her, all his prepared words scattered like leaves in wind. I wanted to apologize, he said simply. For what specifically? For how I treated you that morning. For what I said when you told me about the pregnancy. For how cruel I was. He stopped, regrouped. There's no excuse for my behavior. I was paranoid and damaged and wrong. Avery's expression didn't change, didn't soften. Is that all? No. Mike took a shaky breath. I want to explain, even though explanations aren't excuses. My father's death messed me up. He spent his final years bitter and alone, convinced everyone wanted his money. 3 women tried to claim he'd fathered their children, all proven false. He made me promise to protect our family fortune. From women like me. Avery's voice was sharp enough to draw blood. From anyone. He didn't trust anyone by the end. And I inherited that sickness. That morning after the gala, I woke up and panicked. We'd been so open, so honest, and it terrified me. So I became him. Cold, dismissive, cruel. I hurt you because I was afraid. You didn't just hurt me, Mike. Avery's hands clenched around her cup. You accused me of being a con artist. You offered me money to get rid of my... She stopped abruptly, jaw tightening, catching herself. Mike's stomach dropped, ice flooding his veins. You're what? Avery stood quickly, gathering her bag. This was a mistake. We're not doing this. Avery, please. Mike stood too, desperate. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I'm not even asking for it. I just needed you to know that I regret every word, every assumption, every moment of cruelty. She studied him for a long moment. Why now? Why does any of this matter now? Because seeing you yesterday made me realize I never stopped thinking about that night, about you, about who I became. I've spent years trying to be better than my father, but I'll never succeed if I don't face what I did to you. You want absolution, Avery said, and it wasn't a question. No, I want to acknowledge the truth, that you were genuine and kind and brave enough to be vulnerable with me, and I repaid that with accusations and cruelty. That's on me. I have to live with it. Avery picked up her bag. Your 15 minutes are up, Mr. Driggers. Wait, please, can I ask you one question? She paused, not agreeing, but not leaving. Are you happy? Mike asked quietly. Did you build a good life? I need to know my cruelty didn't define you. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe pain. I built an excellent life. I have everything I need and nothing I don't. I'm genuinely glad, Mike said, meaning it despite how the words tasted like ash. For what it's worth, your questions yesterday about my proposal were exactly right. The project will be better because of your input. That's my job, Mr. Driggers, holding developers accountable. It's nothing personal. I know, but I wanted you to know I heard you. Avery left without looking back. Mike sat heavily, staring at the untouched latte. The conversation had gone better than he'd feared and worse than he'd hoped, but something nagged at him, words she'd almost said but caught before they escaped. You offered me money to get rid of my... Get rid of what? The memory? The relationship? Or something else? Mike's blood ran cold. When she'd told him about the pregnancy, he'd assumed she'd terminated after their confrontation. He'd never followed up, never checked, had been too ashamed to wonder. But what if she hadn't? What if somewhere out there existed a child he'd rejected? No. He was being paranoid again, letting his father's damage color perception. Avery would have told him if she'd gone through with the pregnancy. There would have been legal notifications, something, unless she'd meant what she said about wanting nothing from him. Mike paid for both coffees and walked out into morning air that felt too thin. He tried to dismiss the thought, to focus on his schedule, but the possibility burrowed into his mind like a splinter. Around noon, his assistant mentioned his afternoon meetings had been rescheduled. You're clear until tomorrow morning. Thanks, I'm taking the afternoon off. Call only for emergencies. Mike started driving with no destination in mind, just a desperate need to move. He drove through downtown Seattle, past the waterfront site, past the hotel where he'd met Avery, past the building where he'd said those unforgivable words. The city felt different now, haunted by memories he couldn't escape. He found himself in a family-friendly neighborhood he didn't recognize. A farmer's market had set up in a parking lot. Mike almost drove past, but traffic forced him to stop at a light. While waiting, his eyes scanned the market idly. Then he saw her. Avery stood at a produce stand examining tomatoes, smiling at something the vendor said. She looked relaxed, happy. She moved slightly, reaching for her purse, and Mike saw what she'd been blocking from view. A double stroller, with two little girls. Time stopped. Everything, sound, movement, breath, ceased to exist except for those two children. They looked young, maybe preschool age. Beautiful, with warm brown skin and dark curly hair, dressed in matching outfits in different colors. One focused intently on a picture book. The other looked around with wide, curious eyes. The curious one turned her head, looking at something across the market, and Mike's heart stopped completely. He knew that expression. He'd seen it in photos of his mother as a child, in pictures of his sister, the shape of the eyes, the curve of the smile. It was his family's face on this tiny stranger. The light changed. Cars honked behind him. Mike sat frozen, unable to move, unable to process, unable to breathe. Those were his daughters. He knew it with bone-deep conviction that bypassed logic and went straight to truth. Another horn blared. Mike's hands moved automatically, pulling forward, pulling over 3 blocks away. He sat there shaking, his entire understanding of reality crumbling. He had children, daughters, 2 of them, and he'd known nothing, had never checked, had convinced himself it wasn't his concern. You offered me money to get rid of my... She'd almost said it this morning. get rid of my pregnancy, get rid of our children. And she'd done the opposite, had carried them and birthed them and raised them alone while he'd moved on with his life. Mike pulled out his phone with trembling hands. He knew people, had resources. One call to a private investigator would provide proof. But did he have the right? Avery had made her choice clear. She wanted nothing from him, had built her life deliberately without him. But those were his children, his daughters. He'd missed their entire lives because of his own cruelty. The guilt that had plagued him for years was nothing compared to what crashed over him now. This wasn't about a woman he'd wronged or words he couldn't take back. This was about two innocent children who'd grown up without a father because he'd been too broken to trust. Mike sat in his car and understood, with crushing clarity, what he'd actually destroyed. Not just a relationship, an entire family. His family. He'd become exactly what he'd feared. His father had at least been wounded by actual betrayal. Mike had just been wounded by fear and had inflicted that wound on everyone around him. That night, alone in his penthouse, Mike made the call. He hired an investigator to confirm what he already knew, to make real what his heart had recognized in a single glance. The truth would arrive in a few days, and then Mike would have to decide what to do with knowledge he had no right to, but couldn't unknow. His daughters existed. They were real and alive and beautiful, and he had absolutely no idea how to begin making amends for a betrayal that started before their first breath. But he had to try, because that's what fathers do, and he was a father now, whether he deserved to be or not. Chapter 7. The reckoning begins. Regret is a ghost that haunts every mirror, every empty room, every road not taken. The investigator's report arrived within 48 hours. Mike opened the envelope in his office after hours, when the building was empty and no one could witness whatever he was about to discover. Twins, Luna and Ava Morgan, born in Portland on a rainy March evening. He calculated backward, confirmed they'd been conceived that night. 36 weeks gestation. Birth certificates listed no father, just a blank space where his name should have been. Medical records showed a complicated pregnancy requiring bed rest. Gestational diabetes, dangerously high blood pressure. Avery had given birth alone except for a labor nurse, had checked herself and two newborns out 48 hours later with only hired help because she'd had no one else. The investigator included photos, public ones from social media. The girls at a playground laughing on swings, their third birthday party, matching dresses and a homemade cake. First day of preschool, holding hands, Luna looking nervous while Ava grinned fearlessly. Mike stared at those images until they blurred, until tears he'd been holding back finally broke through. He'd missed all of it, every single moment. The pregnancy complications and the terrifying labor and sleepless nights, and first smiles and first words and first everything. The report detailed Avery's life too. She'd started Morgan Urban Solutions when the twins were barely walking, had built it while juggling motherhood and heartbreak. Every award, every project, every accolade, she'd done it while raising two children alone. There was no partner mentioned, no boyfriend, no husband. Avery Morgan had been a one-woman army, and she'd won decisively. Mike called an emergency board meeting the next morning, gathering his leadership team before he could second-guess himself. "I need to make substantial changes," Mike announced, standing at the table's head, "starting with our labor practices. I want third-party audits of all contractors, with immediate action on violations. I want to establish a foundation supporting single parents pursuing business ownership, and I want to revamp our hiring practices to prioritize candidates from underrepresented communities." His CFO frowned, clearly concerned. "This seems sudden. What's driving these changes?" "The only crisis is that we've been operating with the wrong values for too long. Profit can't be our only metric. We need to build in ways that actually help communities." The meeting lasted hours. Mike fielded skepticism and resistance, using his controlling stake to push through changes. Some looked concerned about his mental state. Let them wonder. That evening, Mike visited the first of what would become many volunteer commitments. A community center in a low-income Seattle neighborhood ran after-school programs for children whose parents worked multiple jobs. Mike had donated money before, but he'd never actually showed up. Now he helped kids with science projects, his rusty physics knowledge barely adequate. A boy showed him a drawing of a rocket ship. A girl asked about earthquakes. Mike answered patiently, gently, wondering if Luna and Ava asked similar questions, wondering who answered them. He started spending every free evening at places like this: community centers, after-school programs, literacy initiatives, food banks. He didn't publicize his volunteer work, didn't tell his PR team. He did it because it was what he should have been doing all along, and because somewhere in this city, Avery was raising two daughters who deserved a better world. Weeks passed. The Seattle waterfront project moved through evaluation phases. Mike and Avery maintained scrupulous professionalism during meetings. His proposal advanced to the final round, partly because it was genuinely excellent and partly because Avery had the integrity to judge fairly. They never referenced anything personal. Avery asked tough questions. Mike provided thorough answers. They existed in the same rooms without acknowledging the enormous weight of everything unsaid. Mike heard things through industry channels. Avery had rented a family-friendly apartment in Queen Anne. She'd been seen at local parks and museums, always with two little girls and an older woman. She'd created a whole portable world for their daughters in Seattle, and Mike existed nowhere in it. He deserved that absence. But knowledge didn't ease the ache of watching his children grow from a careful distance. 3 months into the project timeline, Mike attended a community input session at a local elementary school. These sessions were required, giving neighborhood residents a voice. Mike usually sent representatives, but he'd committed to being more hands-on. The school gym was filled with folding chairs and concerned citizens. Children's artwork covered the walls. Mike took a seat in the back, reviewing presentation notes. "Mr. Driggers?" He looked up. Avery stood in the aisle, expression carefully neutral. "Ms. Morgan, I didn't realize you'd be attending. Community input is crucial. I like to hear directly from the people these projects will actually impact." She moved to sit several rows ahead. The session proceeded. Residents asked pointed questions about traffic and green space. Mike answered honestly, admitting limitations, refusing to make false promises. During a break, children flooded the gym. Mike stood to stretch, and that's when he saw them. Two little girls holding hands, examining the refreshment table with intense concentration. They wore matching jackets in different colors, one purple, one teal. The purple jacket girl reached for a cookie, then stopped, looking at her sister as if asking permission. The teal jacket girl nodded solemnly, and they each took one cookie, carefully and politely. Mike couldn't breathe. They were real in ways photos couldn't capture. The way they moved, their mannerisms, the aliveness of them. One of the girls, teal jacket Ava, turned and looked directly at him. She tilted her head curiously, then smiled with total, unself-conscious joy. His mother's smile, his sister's eyes, his family's face looking at him with complete trust because she didn't know any better. "Luna, Ava, come here now." Avery appeared from nowhere, voice gentle but firm. The girls ran to her immediately, wrapping themselves around her legs. She rested one hand on each small head, protective, her eyes locking on Mike with clear warning. "Stay away." "Who's that?" Luna asked, pointing at Mike with innocent curiosity. "Someone Mama works with," Avery said smoothly. "Say hello politely, then we're leaving." "Hello!" Ava waved enthusiastically. Luna offered a small smile and quiet hi. Mike's throat closed around words he couldn't form. He managed a wave, a smile he hoped looked normal, watched as Avery shepherded the girls toward the exit. He stood frozen in that gym, surrounded by noise and people, feeling more alone than he'd ever felt. He'd heard his daughters' voices, seen their faces up close, watched them interact with the mother who'd given them everything. That night, Mike sat in his penthouse and wrote a letter he had no intention of sending. He wrote about regret and shame, and the father he'd failed to become. He wrote about two little girls in matching jackets, about their careful politeness and beautiful smiles. He wrote until his hand cramped and his vision blurred. Then he burned it, watching his words turn to ash, knowing that some mistakes couldn't be undone with apologies or money or even genuine transformation. He'd destroyed something precious before it even existed, and he'd have to live with that truth forever. But maybe, just maybe, he could become someone worthy of the children he'd rejected, even if they never knew his name. Maybe he could build a world that was better for them and everyone like them. It wasn't redemption, it wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. The only thing he had left to offer, and Mike Driggers would spend the rest of his life making that offering, because that's what you do when you've failed utterly. You keep trying anyway, even when it's hopeless, especially when it's hopeless. Chapter 8. Confrontation and Walls. Apologies are just words until they're backed by the weight of real change. Avery knew Mike had seen them at the community meeting. She'd watched his face shatter so completely when his eyes landed on Luna and Ava that for one fractured second she'd almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But pity was a luxury she couldn't afford when protecting her daughters from a man who'd rejected them before they'd existed. She'd left the meeting early, making excuses about bedtime routines, and driven home with her heart racing. The girls chattered obliviously in the back seat about cookies and other kids. "Mama, why are you breathing funny?" Luna asked, her perceptive nature missing nothing. "Just tired, baby. Long day." That night, after stories and kisses and blessed silence, Avery poured herself wine she didn't drink and stood at the window staring at Seattle's lights. She'd been naive to think she could work this project without collision. The city was too small for both of them. Her phone rang. Unknown number, but she knew. "You need to stop this," Avery said without preamble. "I know." Mike's voice was rough, exhausted. "I'm sorry. I didn't know they'd be there. They go everywhere with me when I'm in Seattle. That's what single parenting means. They're part of my entire life because I don't have the luxury of compartmentalizing." Silence stretched between them. Then, "They're beautiful, absolutely beautiful." "Don't." Avery's voice was sharp. "Avery, please, I need to talk to you. Really talk, not 15 minutes in a coffee shop. I need—" "You need?" Avery cut him off, voice rising. "You lost the right to need anything from me when you called my pregnancy a scheme and offered me money to make your problem disappear." "I know. You're absolutely right. But those children are my children," Avery interrupted, voice hard as diamond. "Mine. I carried them. I birthed them. I raised them through every sleepless night and every milestone. You were offered a choice when they were nothing more than possibility, and you made it clearly. That choice doesn't get a do-over just because you saw them and felt guilty. Can I please just see you, somewhere private where we can talk?" Against every instinct, Avery agreed, maybe because she needed to say things too. "My office, tomorrow evening, 6 p.m. sharp after my team has left." She gave him the address and hung up. The next day crawled by. Avery was sharp in meetings, snapping at her team over minor issues. Jasmine pulled her aside before leaving. "You okay, boss? You seem off today." "Just stress from the Seattle project. More intense than anticipated." Jasmine studied her with knowing eyes. "It's Driggers, isn't it? There's history there." Avery considered lying, then gave up. "Ancient history. Nothing that affects my work. If you need backup—" "I don't, but thank you." Mike arrived at precisely 6 o'clock. Avery buzzed him up, watching through her window as he crossed the workspace. When he entered her office, his eyes immediately found the photo wall, Luna and Ava at every age, their artwork, their handprints, their entire lives documented. "Sit," Avery said curtly. Mike sat, looking smaller somehow, diminished. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "Let's be clear," Avery said, standing because she needed the power of height. "This isn't for you. This is for me. I have things that need to be said, and you're going to sit there and listen. Understand?" "Yes." Avery took a breath. "You asked if I built a good life. I did. I built an extraordinary life. I have 2 daughters who are smart and kind and fearless. I have a company that genuinely changes communities. I have friends who've become family and a nanny who loves my girls like her own grandchildren. I built all of that from nothing while pregnant with twins, while you sat in your tower counting your money." Mike flinched, but didn't interrupt. "You don't get to feel sorry for yourself about missing their lives. You weren't absent through circumstance. You chose not to be present. There's a fundamental difference. Absent is what happens when life intervenes. What you did was deliberate rejection." "I know." "Do you? Do you really understand?" Avery's voice shook with controlled fury. "Because I don't think you do. I was 28 and terrified. I thought I was carrying 1 baby, found out it was 2. I developed gestational diabetes. My blood pressure spiked so high I was on bed rest for months. I went through 18 hours of labor with no partner, no family, no one to hold my hand except a nurse who felt sorry for me." Tears streamed down Avery's face, but her voice remained steady. "I came home from the hospital with 2 newborns and no idea what I was doing. They had colic, both screaming for hours. They wouldn't sleep. I was so exhausted I hallucinated. I cried more than they did some nights. And through all of it, I remembered your voice saying, 'It's your fault you got pregnant.' And I hated you so intensely I could taste it." Mike's face was white, hands clenched tightly. "But I survived," Avery continued, gaining strength. "I more than survived, I thrived, because hate is excellent fuel when channeled correctly. Every time I wanted to quit, I thought about you living your comfortable life, and I pushed harder. I built my company to prove I didn't need you. I raised extraordinary daughters to prove you'd made the worst mistake of your life. And I won, Mike. I won every single battle." "You did," Mike whispered, broken. "You absolutely did. So, when you tell me you regret what you did, when you show up volunteering with kids, when you reform your labor practices and start foundations, I see it. The whole industry sees it. Everyone's discussing how Mike Driggers suddenly found his conscience. But here's what you need to understand. Your redemption arc doesn't automatically include my daughters." Mike looked up, devastated. "I'm not asking." "Yes, you are. Maybe not with direct words, but with every action. You're trying to become someone worthy of them. But you can't earn your way back into their lives like it's a business deal. They don't know you exist as their father. They're happy in a world where daddy isn't someone they're missing." "Avery, I would never try to disrupt their lives. He stopped, struggled. "I just want to be better. For them, even if from a distance." "Why? Why does it matter now?" "Because seeing them made me understand what I destroyed. Not some abstract concept, but actual human beings who share my DNA and none of my presence. I can't fix what I did, but I can't pretend they don't exist either." Avery sank into her chair, exhausted. "What do you want from me, Mike?" "Permission to keep trying to be better. Permission to exist in the same city without you feeling like you need to protect them every second. I'm not asking for rights or custody or even acknowledgement. I'm just asking not to be completely shut out from the possibility that someday, maybe, if you ever decide they should know I exist, I'll be someone worth knowing." It was the first truly honest thing he'd said. "I need time," Avery said finally. "This isn't a decision I make lightly. Those girls are my entire world. I will destroy anyone who threatens their peace, including you." "I understand." "Do you? Because if I see even a hint that you're trying to manipulate your way into their lives, if you accidentally show up places you know I will destroy you. Not just your reputation, everything. I have that power now." Mike met her eyes. "I believe you, and I deserve it." They sat in heavy silence. In the photos on the wall, Luna and Ava smiled, frozen in moments Mike would never get back. "For what it's worth," Mike said quietly, "I think you're an incredible mother. They're lucky to have you." "They're not lucky," Avery corrected sharply. "They have me because I chose them. Every day, every moment I choose them. That's not luck, that's love." "You're right. I'm sorry." Avery stood, signaling the conversation was over. The waterfront project evaluation continues. I'll judge your proposal fairly because that's my job. What happens between us personally is separate. Can you maintain that boundary? Yes. Then we're done here. Mike walked to the door, paused. Thank you for listening, for everything you've given them. Avery didn't respond. She watched him leave, then locked her office door, and finally let herself break down. The confrontation had drained her, ripped open wounds she'd thought were healed. When the tears stopped, Avery washed her face and called Rosa. "How are my girls?" "Perfect angels," Rosa said warmly. "We made cookies. They saved you 3. I'll be home in 20 minutes. Driving back, Avery made herself a promise. She would consider Mike's request. Not for him, but for Luna and Ava. They deserved to make their own choices about their father when they were old enough, but that decision would be years away. In the meantime, she'd keep doing what she'd always done, loving them fiercely, protecting them completely. She just hoped she was strong enough to keep that promise without her heart breaking every time she looked at Mike and saw the father her daughters would never know. Chapter 9. The Long Road Back. Redemption isn't a destination. It's every small choice to be better than you were yesterday. 6 months passed. Mike threw himself into becoming someone different. He reformed Drigger's construction from the inside out, implementing labor standards beyond legal requirements. He established the Morgan Foundation, named publicly for Avery Morgan's influence on ethical development, privately as tribute to 2 little girls he was trying to deserve. The foundation supported single parents starting businesses, providing grants, mentorship, and childcare assistance. Mike reviewed every application personally, seeing Avery's struggle reflected in hundreds of other stories. Women who'd been abandoned, building empires while raising children alone. He funded them all. Every worthy application got approved. His board thought he'd lost his mind. His accountants warned about unsustainable spending. Mike didn't care. He continued volunteering at community centers, but now he understood why. Not to be seen as good or earn redemption points. It was about the kids, helping with homework, explaining science, being consistent presence for children who had so few consistent adults. One evening at Rainier Community Center, a boy named Jason asked him to help with a project about famous buildings. "My dad was supposed to help," Jason said quietly, "but he doesn't live with us anymore." Mike's chest tightened. "Well, I'm here. Let's make this the best building project your class has ever seen." They worked together for weeks. Mike brought photos from his company's archives, explained engineering in kid-friendly terms, helped Jason build a Space Needle model from popsicle sticks. When Jason won second place, his smile was so bright it hurt to look at. "Thanks, Mr. Mike," Jason said, hugging him impulsively. "You're like a dad, but better because you chose to help even though you didn't have to." Mike went home that night and cried. Not for himself, but for Jason and every child who had to thank adults for basic care because they'd learned not to expect it. The Seattle waterfront project moved into final phases. Drigger's construction won the contract. Avery's evaluation deemed their proposal most comprehensive and community-focused. Mike knew she'd judged fairly without favoritism or sabotage, which somehow made the victory bittersweet. They saw each other at project meetings, always professional, always polite. The air between them crackled with everything unsaid, but neither crossed the line Avery had drawn. Mike learned about his daughters in indirect ways. He overheard Avery on a call, laughing about Luna's dinosaur obsession. He saw them at a distance at a park, Ava climbing structures while Luna read on a bench. He collected these glimpses like treasures. He never approached, never violated Avery's trust, but he watched from afar, trying to memorize everything. One Saturday morning, Mike volunteered at a weekend science fair for elementary kids. The event was held at a community center he'd been supporting, part of their STEM initiative. He manned a station about structural engineering, showing kids how to build bridges from toothpicks. Children rotated through stations. Mike was helping a girl construct a suspension bridge when he heard a familiar voice. This station looks cool. Can we do this one? Mike's blood turned to ice. He looked up slowly. Luna and Ava stood at his table, wearing matching sundresses in different colors, holding hands. They had no idea who he was. Of course, Mike said, voice surprisingly steady. What are your names? I'm Ava, the Boulder twin announced, and this is my sister Luna. We're twins, but we're not identical because we have different personalities. I like books about adventures, Luna clarified quietly. Mike's heart shattered and rebuilt simultaneously. Those sound like excellent interests. Want to build a bridge? For the next 20 minutes, Mike worked with his daughters. He showed them how to create triangular supports, explained weight distribution in simple terms, praised Luna's careful precision and Ava's creative problem-solving. They chatted about school, favorite foods, their mum's work. Mama builds things for whole cities, Ava said proudly. She's the smartest person ever. She sounds amazing, Mike managed. She is, Luna agreed. She takes care of us and works a lot and still has time for parks and stories. She's magic. Mike wanted to tell them yes, their mother was magic. Instead, he said, Your bridge is really strong. Want to test it? They placed weights on the structure, squealing when it held. When it finally collapsed, they laughed instead of getting upset. Mr. Mike, you're a really good teacher, Ava said seriously. Mr. Mike, not Dad. Just a nice man who'd spent 30 minutes with them. Thank you, Mike said, throat tight. You two are excellent engineers. Can we come back next week? Luna asked. We do this every Saturday. You're welcome anytime. They high-fived him and ran to the next station. Mike watched them go, these two pieces of his heart walking around outside his body. Sweet kids, another volunteer commented. They yours? No, Mike said quietly. But I wish they were. He made it through the rest of the fair on autopilot. When it ended, he sat in his car, hands gripping the steering wheel. He'd spoken to his daughters, taught them something, made them smile. They'd touched his hand, looked at him with trust. His phone rang. Avery. We need to talk, she said. I saw you with them. Mike's stomach dropped. I didn't approach them. They came to my station. I didn't know they'd be there. I know. I saw the whole thing. She paused. Meet me at the same coffee shop. Tomorrow morning. 7 a.m. She hung up. Mike barely slept. He replayed every moment with Luna and Ava. When Avery arrived at the coffee shop, she looked exhausted, but somehow softer. She sat across from him, accepted the latte this time, took a long drink before speaking. You were good with them, she said finally. Mike's breath caught. They're extraordinary. I know. I made them that way. No arrogance, just fact. But watching you with them, you were patient, kind, engaged. You treated them like people, not obligations. Avery, let me finish. She wrapped her hands around her cup. I've been watching you for months. The foundation, the community work, the changes at your company. At first I thought it was performance, but it's not, is it? No. You're actually trying to become a better person. Not for me, not even for them specifically, just better. I'm trying, Mike said quietly. I don't know if I'll ever succeed, but I'm trying. Avery studied him. They deserve to know their father. Not now. They're too young. But someday. And when that day comes, I want them to meet someone worth knowing. Hope bloomed in Mike's chest, terrifying and fragile. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm considering it. Not committing, just considering. They ask about their father sometimes. I've always said he wasn't ready to be a dad, which was true. But maybe he could be ready someday. I would do anything. I know you would. That's why I'm considering it. But there are conditions. Avery's voice turned firm. You don't get to be fun dad who shows up for good parts. If you're in, you're all in. Sleepless nights, tantrums, parent-teacher conferences, everything. You don't get to decide it's too hard and bail. I wouldn't. You did once. The words hit like a slap. Mike absorbed them. You're right. I did. And I can't promise I'll be perfect because I have no idea how to be a father, but I can promise I won't run. If you give me a chance with them, I'll show up. Every time. For everything. Avery was quiet. This isn't about you and me. Whatever we had died long ago. This is purely about Luna and Ava. I understand. Do you? Because the moment this becomes about your feelings or your redemption instead of their well-being, I'm done. They're not therapy for my guilt, Mike agreed. They're people who deserve better than what I gave them. If I can be part of making their lives better, that's all I want. Avery finished her latte. I'm not making any decisions today, but I'm not saying no anymore either. That's all you get right now. It was more than Mike had hoped for. Thank you. Don't thank me. Earn it. Keep being the person you were at that science fair, and maybe in a year or two we'll have this conversation again, and I'll have a different answer. She stood to leave. Mike stood too. Avery, can I ask one question? 1. Did you bring them to that science fair knowing I'd be there? A ghost of a smile crossed her face. I brought them, because it's a good program. If I knew you'd be there or not, does it matter? She left him wondering. But this time, the wondering came with something new. Hope. Mike drove to the waterfront construction site. It was Sunday, the site empty. He stood there, looking at what they were building together, him and Avery, separately but toward the same goal. Maybe that's what this was. They weren't building a family or a relationship. They were building something better, a foundation strong enough to support 2 little girls who deserved a father as incredible as their mother. Mike pulled out his phone and made a note. Luna likes books about adventures. Ava is fearless, both brilliant, both deserve everything. Then he got to work, showing up, being better, earning the privilege of someday, maybe someday, being called something more than Mr. Mike. Chapter 10. Coming home to love. Love isn't about the fairy tale beginning. It's about who stays when the story gets real. 18 months later, the Seattle waterfront project stood complete. Mixed-income housing integrated seamlessly with commercial spaces. Green parks curved along the water. Public art celebrated local history. It was everything Avery had fought for. The dedication ceremony drew dignitaries and press. Avery stood at the podium in a deep blue suit, her speech highlighting community members who'd shaped the project. Mike watched from the crowd, proud in a way that had nothing to do with his company's role. Luna and Ava attended with Rosa, now old enough to sit through the ceremony without fidgeting. They were almost 5, bright and curious and painfully beautiful. Mike had seen them dozens of times over the past year, always at public events, always at careful distance, always as Mr. Mike from the science program they still attended. Avery had created opportunities for proximity without pressure. The science program. A park where Mike sometimes played basketball that had an excellent playground. A community garden where Mike volunteered and Avery sometimes brought the girls to plant vegetables, chance encounters that probably weren't chance at all. In those moments, Mike had learned about his daughters. Luna's gentleness hid steel. She stood up to bullies even though it terrified her. Ava's fearlessness came with surprising emotional intelligence. She always knew when someone needed a hug. They were individuals, fully formed people, and he'd fallen completely in love with them. After the ceremony there was a reception. Mike mingled professionally, but his attention kept drifting to where Avery stood with the girls. Luna was explaining something to a journalist with complete seriousness. Ava had charmed the mayor into examining a rock she'd found. Mr. Mike, Ava spotted him, waved enthusiastically. Luna's face lit up. They ran over and Mike crouched to their level. Did you see the park? Ava demanded. With the swings? I helped design that, Mike said. What do you think? It's perfect, Luna declared. Avery appeared, her professional smile softening when she looked at the girls. Ask me what? Can we go to the park, please? Avery checked her watch. The reception's almost over. Rosa, can you take them? Of course, Rosa agreed. gathering coats and snacks. Mike watched them leave, feeling the familiar ache. "Walk with me," Avery said quietly. They left the reception walking along the waterfront paths they'd argued over and ultimately created together. The evening was cool, the water calm. "It's beautiful," Avery said. "Better than I imagined." "You made it beautiful. I just funded your vision. We made it beautiful. Together." She stopped at a railing overlooking the water. "I've been thinking about that a lot. What we can build when we work toward the same goal." Mike's heart started racing. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you've shown up. For 18 months you've been consistent, patient, genuine. You've let me set every boundary and never pushed. You've become exactly who I asked you to become, someone worth knowing." "Avery, the girls ask about you," she continued. "They call you their friend Mr. Mike. Last week Luna asked why you don't come to dinner like Auntie Rosa, and I realized I don't have a good answer anymore." Mike couldn't breathe. "What did you tell her?" "I said maybe we could invite you sometime, and Ava asked if that meant you could be their dad." A laugh escaped Mike's throat, half sob. "That's not exactly how it works." "I know, but she's not completely wrong." Avery turned to face him. "I've been protecting them from you so long, I stopped asking if I was also protecting them from something good. They deserve to know their father, and you've worked hard enough to deserve being known. I don't want to confuse them or disrupt their lives. It will be confusing. There will be hard questions I'll have to answer honestly, about why you weren't there before, about my choice to keep you separate. But they're strong enough to understand. And I think maybe I'm strong enough to share them." "Are you sure?" "No," Avery admitted. "I'm terrified, but I've built my whole life on being brave when it mattered. This matters." "What does this look like?" "Slowly," Avery said firmly. "We tell them the truth in age-appropriate terms. We explain that you're their father, that you made mistakes, but you've worked hard to be better. We let them process however they need, and then we see what happens." "And us?" Mike asked quietly. "What are we in this scenario?" Avery was quiet, eyes on the water. "I don't know yet. The woman you hurt doesn't exist anymore. I'm someone completely different now, and you're not the man who said those cruel things. We're both strangers to who we were that night. But I see you with them, and I see the man I thought I met during that storm. Patient, kind, genuine. And I wonder if maybe that person was real all along, just buried under trauma. I wonder if he's finally free." Mike moved closer, not touching but near enough to feel her warmth. "That man was real. He was just too afraid when things got complicated. But I'm not afraid anymore. Losing you and them taught me that fear costs more than courage." "Pretty words," Avery said, but her voice was soft. "True words. Avery, I'm not asking to rush anything. I'm not asking for a relationship or anything except the chance to be part of their lives. If that's all I ever get, I'll count myself lucky. But if someday you decide you want more, if you decide I've earned more, I'll be here. And if I'm never ready for more than co-parenting, then we'll be the best co-parents those girls could ask for. They're what matters." Avery reached out, took his hand. The touch was electric, familiar despite years and damage. "Let's start with Sunday dinner. This week. You come to our apartment, we tell them together, and we see how they handle it." "No promises beyond that," Mike agreed. They stood as the sun set over the waterfront they'd built together, hands linked. Sunday arrived with spring rain. Mike stood outside Avery's building, holding flowers for her and books for the girls, nothing extravagant, just carefully chosen based on what he'd learned. His hands shook as he pressed the buzzer. The apartment was warm and lived in. Luna and Ava were setting the table, faces serious with concentration. "Mr. Mike," Ava abandoned her task. "You brought flowers. Are you staying for dinner?" Luna asked. "If that's okay with you," Mike said, crouching down. "It's okay," Luna said solemnly. "Mama said you're special." Mike's throat closed. He looked at Avery, who stood in the kitchen doorway, her expression soft and terrified and brave. Dinner was surprisingly easy. The girls chatted about everything. Rosa asked thoughtful questions. Avery watched it all, checking constantly that they were comfortable. After dinner, after Rosa had left and the girls were in pajamas, Avery called them to the couch. Mike sat in a chair across from them. "Luna, Ava, Mama needs to tell you something important," Avery began. "You know how some kids have daddies and you don't?" Both girls nodded. "Well, you do have a daddy. You've always had one. But he hasn't been part of our family because it was complicated. But he wants to be now if you want that too." "Where is he?" Ava asked, looking around. Avery took a deep breath. "He's right here. Mr. Mike is your daddy." Silence. Luna and Ava stared at Mike, expressions cycling through confusion and shock. "Mr. Mike from science?" Luna asked carefully. "Yes, baby." "But why wasn't he our daddy before?" Ava's voice was small. "Before you were born, Daddy made a big mistake. He was scared and said hurtful things, so Mama decided to raise you by herself. But Daddy has worked really hard to become a better person, and Mama thinks maybe he deserves a chance." "Did you say sorry?" Luna asked Mike directly. "Yes," Mike said, voice breaking. "I said sorry to your Mama, and I'm saying sorry to you too. I should have been there from the beginning. I'm so sorry I wasn't." "Are you going to leave again?" Ava asked. "No," he said firmly. "I promise I will never leave you. I will show up for everything. Good days and bad days forever. That's what daddies do, and I'm going to be the best daddy I can be." The girls looked at each other, having a silent twin conversation. Then Luna slipped off the couch and walked over, studying his face. "You have the same smile as Ava," she observed. "I do?" "Yeah. And Ava has your eyes." Ava joined her sister. "Can we call you Daddy now?" "If you want to," Mike said carefully. "I think Daddy," Ava decided, "because that's what daddies are called." Luna climbed into his lap, solid and warm and real. Ava followed. Mike had both daughters in his arms for the first time. "Do daddies read bedtime stories?" Luna asked. "The best daddies do," Avery said softly, tears streaming. Mike read 3 books that night, his daughters pressed against his sides. When Avery declared it bedtime, both girls hugged him tightly. "Will you be here tomorrow?" Ava asked. "I can be, if your mama says it's okay." "It's okay," Avery said. "We'll figure out a schedule." After the girls were tucked in, Avery and Mike stood in her kitchen. "They handled it better than I expected," Avery said. "You prepared them perfectly. We're going to have harder days. They'll have questions, be angry sometimes." "I know, and I'll be here for all of it." Avery leaned against the counter. "Do you remember what day it is?" Mike frowned. Then it hit him. "The gala, the storm." 5 years ago tonight. 5 years ago we met. We thought we understood connection. We didn't understand anything. But maybe we understand now," Mike said quietly. "Maybe we finally know what real connection looks like." "What does it look like?" "It looks like showing up even when it's hard. It looks like choosing someone because they make your life better. It looks like building something together that's stronger than anything alone." Mike closed the distance, hand gentle on her cheek. "Avery Morgan, you are the most extraordinary person I've ever met. You took my cruelty and turned it into strength. You raised 2 perfect humans while building an empire. I don't know if I'll ever be worthy, but I want to spend the rest of my life trying." "You're not the man who hurt me," Avery said softly, "and I'm not the woman you hurt. We're different people now, better people. Maybe these people can build something real." "I'd like that. So would I. But slowly. The girls come first. Whatever timeline you need." Avery smiled. "You know what's funny? I spent years hating you, then years being indifferent. I never thought I'd stand in my kitchen wanting to kiss you again. Do you?" "Yeah," she admitted. "I really do." Mike leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. She didn't. Their lips met gently, a promise, a beginning, a choice made with full knowledge. When they pulled apart, Avery was crying, I'm terrified this won't work. Me too, but I'm more terrified of not trying. Avery rested her forehead against his chest. I don't need you, Mike Driggers. I built a beautiful life without you. I know. But maybe I choose you anyway. Not because I need saving, but because you finally became someone worth choosing. Mike wrapped his arms around her. I choose you too. Every day, for the rest of my life. Not because I'm trying to fix mistakes, but because you three are the best thing that ever happened to me. They stood there, two people who'd taken the longest road back to each other. Outside, rain fell softly, the same city where they'd met, where they'd broken, where they'd rebuilt themselves. In the next room, Luna and Ava slept peacefully, dreaming whatever children dream, safe knowing tomorrow their daddy would be there. And in that kitchen, Avery Morgan and Mike Driggers held each other and understood that love isn't about perfect beginnings. It's about who stays when the story gets real, who does the work, who chooses every single day to be worthy of being chosen. They'd both stay, they'd both work, they'd both choose. And that, finally, was enough. The end.